Cool. So we left off
Ooh,
talking.
don't forget to record.
What's that? Do we have a question?
Don't forget to record.
Yeah, I got to record. Yeah, exactly. So
Oh, he's saying record. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, which
Thanks.
is kind of unfortunate that people don't have access to these recordings. I have them on my OneDrive, but apparently students can't get to them. I'm still trying to work that out. And we can't store them on the servers at school because there's not enough room. So lesson learned, I think next time we have a pandemic, we'll have to get a bigger memory bank.
AWS is raking it in, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we literally get like an email every week. Erase your Zoom lectures, and it's like, well, why are we recording them if we're just going to erase them?
Seems kind of counterproductive.
You got it. So, let's see. All kinds of fun stuff happening at my day job too. So we left off yesterday talking about the different soil orders, and we left off with Oxisols. We're kind of at the end of the road here, and with the different soil orders, just a couple left. But what I wanted, what I was trying to really drive home yesterday was the fact that if you look at the global, especially the global distribution of these soils, if we go back to Ultisols, Alphasols, and Mollisols are really like the three soil orders that you can really grow the most crops in, the best for growing crops, basically. So, and if you look at the total percentages of those, for mollisols, 7% of the world's soils are mollisols, 10% are alphasols, and 9%, so that's like less than 30% of the actual soil that's out there in the world is really suitable or well suited for growing crops, right? And so if you can imagine, even in the US where we have a ton of mollisols, which is great, but even those areas like aren't all, being utilized even for growing, like look at Washington State and all the fertile like river valleys we have here with the Snoqualmie and even like over in Issaquah, and that whole area used to be old grazing land and farmland historically, and now it's got Home Depot and a Costco, and it's like, are we really using the soil in these places? Are we thinking about those types of things when we're making these land management and land use decisions? And I don't really think it's being considered as much as it should be, unfortunately, because they are such a not only a fragile resource, but there's not that much of it. It's and it just ends up blowing away in some instances, or we cover it with concrete, or it erodes away or slides away, and not too many people think about it. So I'm just trying to raise your awareness about the fragility and the the little amount of soils that are out there actually that can grow food. I mean, there are things growing in oxisols, of course. If you look at the U.S. distribution, we don't have too many because we don't have a lot of tropical areas, and that's pretty much where oxisols form. 8% of them are worldwide, and if you look at the worldwide distribution, it's mostly South America and Brazil, especially Colombia and places like that, in northern South America, and then along in Africa as well, below, so like Central Africa and a little bit in West Africa there. But and this is where you grow. There's a lot of coffee grown in these areas, a lot of bananas, things like that, and which those areas are also because they're dealing with these soils that have low nutrients to begin with. They've worked out some really good shade grown techniques and multi crops, again kind of getting away from that monocrop system. They're learning that wow, if I do bananas and coffee, it's way better for the ecosystem and the soils and things like that, because you're not depleting certain nutrients, and you're getting that healthy mix of um, microorganisms. Got a couple people to let in here. Welcome, welcome.
Hey, Paul.
Yes. Question,
So,
Victoria.
yeah. um, is there ever, say, if we got rid of all the infrastructure, say, around like Issaquah and Snoqualmie and everything with the good soils, could we actually use that soil, or is it going to be destroyed because we put infrastructure on it? Like if we got rid of the infrastructure, would it still be the good fertile soil?
So good question. And yes and no. I mean, basically, once you cap it with um, asphalt or concrete, what you've done is basically kind of stopped soil development in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you haven't completely shut soil development off. That this doesn't really ever happen, um, because there's still organisms down there doing things. It's just that there's no light now. There's not a kind of natural water flow. They tend to either become waterlogged, especially in those kind of situations where you might have a high water table, and so you just they become anaerobic. And but so once you do remove the concrete and let the soil start again, it's not necessarily starting from ground zero, but it is going to be very similar. And so you'll probably want to add some organic matter and some mulch, and maybe plant some clover or some cover crops or things that are going to, produce nitrogen, and also get a variety of roots in the soil there, breaking up the soil and inviting different organisms in, just like you would for your crop fields. But it would take out, I would imagine, probably around 3 to 5 years to get that soil up to its optimum productivity again. Okay, so the last few here, Spodisols, those are my favorite because they have the E horizon, and there's only the 3%, so they're really kind of rare. But you find them here in the U.S. and some in Alaska, and some along the Cascades here. Obviously in the Northwest, Oregon and Washington. Some along the Great Lakes, some in Maine and Vermont, in the Northeast, and then some down in Florida. And those are more of the aquads. So those are more driven by water table, not necessarily precipitation as snow, which is what's driving the spotisols here. And spotisols need a lot of precipitation because you have this leaching of organic matter out of that E horizon, and you need a whole lot of water, a whole lot of hydrolysis, and to be moving those materials through and bleaching that horizon out by leaching those materials down. Vertisols, they're pretty rare too. We do have some, found some in Eastern Washington, but they have a lot of clay in them. They're kind of older ag soils in some ways, but a lot of them have like different pans and like fragipans and things like that. So you'll have like an old plow layer from just decades of plowing. And the main thing about vertisols, which says it in the name, basically has these vertical columns because the way that and they're huge too, these huge columnar structures like the size of your arm, these peds that you can just break off and hold, almost like chunks of basalt rock, you know, that come in columns. And that kind of is what affects their fertility the most, and why they have issues is because it's really hard and not very friable peds either, or structure, and so they're hard to break apart. It's hard for water to infiltrate because it's mostly the montmorillonite and the high shrink swell clays, and so water just kind of trickles right down through and ends up going a foot, 2 feet before you know it, it's out of the soil, it's out of the rooting zone, you know, and so water and nutrients end up leaching out of these soils quite easily. Difficult to get things to grow in them, even though they do have a deep A horizon. So they're kind of scattered around. You do find them, looks like a lot along the Mississippi River, some in eastern Texas, and then a little bit up here, and looks like South Dakota and Montana, but only 2% worldwide. And then our last one is the histosols, which is another one of my favorites. It's completely organic soils, so this is all organic matter. And as we discussed briefly earlier in the quarter, you know, you basically, when you're dealing with soils that are all organic material, you know, they have their different horizons are basically, you know, the amount of weathering and the amount of breaking down that organic matter has had, right? And so you get that stuff you can recognize, like the stuff on the top, the O, and then it gets down into stuff that you can sort of still tell what it is, and then it gets into different stuff, into humic and fulvic acids and things like that that aren't even recognizable. And they disappear when you rub them between your fingers. If you're out in the field and you're digging a pit or taking a soil core and looking at this material, it's, you know, very easy to see it just disappears in your fingers when you rub it. Whereas, you know, an A horizon or even a darker B horizon that you think might be organic matter will have grit and won't disappear between your fingers. And then typically also, you know, you're going to end up having some water in the bottom of your pit because the water table is going to be pretty high. And then you're also going to end up probably having some smell of like sulfur or something like that, because of the anoxic conditions, the microorganisms that break down carbon and other minerals in anoxic conditions tend to give off sulfur dioxide rather than CO2. So these are even probably the least amount of soils you can find in the world and the US. Oops. We have them basically kind of up here in the Great Lakes area. If you can imagine all the swamps and lakes and bogs and mosquitoes and all that fun stuff. There's a few in Hawaii, it looks like, a little bit in Florida and Louisiana along the Gulf. And but then if you look up at the worldwide, you know, if you look in Canada, and then there's some in Alaska as well, and then all along like northern China and Siberia. So those are the soil orders. That was our soil order review. Now, we get to the nitty-gritty here. Soil classification. Classifying soils. So one of the things we do when classifying soils, you identify the diagnostic horizon or diagnostic materials. Determine the soil order, identify the soil moisture regime, and follow the keys to soil taxonomy to key out the lower categories. And I showed you that, this book yesterday, Keys to Soil Taxonomy, which is like a soil scientist Hitchcock, basically. Oh, and then in case you didn't believe me or Corey yesterday, there really is
soil judging
for college students. And if you go to yeah, and you did that,
and high school students
and high school too. Yeah, you can do it. And you did it, and it was fun.
Yeah, I did it in high school. Yeah, we did all kinds of. Yeah, it was super fun going out to sites, and there's like a lot of holes, and each school got their own hole, and you got to like work with a team and use you take slope, all kinds of measurements, and then you like get you're going up against other schools. It's really fun.
Did you get like handicaps for being further away from the site where it's dug, kind of thing? You know, like,
no, so each hole was different, and like they already knew what each hole each hole had, you know, where like the horizons were in each hole, and
right,
like the data on each hole. So you just had to like be accurate, and like
really
it was cool.
What did you win?
And if you like keep winning, you go higher in competition. So it's like advancing to like a state competition, and then you can go to like nationals, and then there's internationals. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Pretty dope.
Yeah. So let's check this out real quick. You guys can learn a little bit more about it. It's kind of interesting.
Students from all over the Southeast traveled to Murray State University to get down and dirty. With soil, I mean, for the 2015 Southeast Region Collegiate Soil Judging Competition.
Great, beautiful day out in the field participating in soil judging, our country's most valuable resource. It's important that we provide an education for our students. And one of the activities that they're able to get that education instead of just a degree is soil judging. So every year our Murray State students participate in soil judging, and about every 10 years you get the opportunity to host it. So we've had nothing but rave reviews of Murray State
There are about 100 students and coaches come here for the Southeast Regional Collegiate Soil Contest, and they are from like University Tennessee of Martin, University of Georgia, University of Auburn, Clemson, NC State, West Virginia, University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Virginia Tech, Tennessee Tech University, and Western Kentucky University.
A day before the contest, practice pits are set up so students from different universities can learn more about the soil in Western Kentucky.
We have 12 sites, right, as 12 pits for the practice pits, and then we have 4 more at the contest site. On the west farm, we have 5 pits. At the north farm, we have 3 pits, and then at Dr. Brand's farm in Hazel, we have 4 more pits. So the practice pits are just so students and other participants can come down and learn about the soil types here at Murray State. Because the soils are so different across the United States, and it's important that they get to come down and really see and get their hands-on experience on the types of soils. You can learn a whole lot in a classroom about what is in the soil, what makes up the soil, but you really don't know how all soils are different until you get out and you put your hands on it.
Some of the different things we've seen in the soil, we've seen a lot of fragipans, and we don't have very many of those in Alabama. So fragipans, they're not really sure how they form, but it's a really hard pan, and it's a restricted layer for water. And so you'll have prismatic structures that will look like prisms in the soil, and each of the prisms will be outlined in a grayer material where the water can get through.
And that new hands-on knowledge is put to test on contest day.
The first thing that you would do is kind of go in and look on the side, look and see where the horizons are on the side of the pit. So once you kind of see about where all the horizons start and stop, that's when you write down your measurement. That's why the tape is in there. You'll write down where those horizons start and stop. And then you'll get to go in there and take samples. Once you take samples from each horizon, you get to come out of the pit and you get to mess with them. You can feel them, you can wet them down, run them between your fingers, see how much, running it in between your fingers, you can see how much sand is in it. And then if it makes a long ribbon as you're messing with it in your fingers, then you know it has a lot of clay in it. You also compare it to a Munsell color chart, which is a color chart for soils that you just flip through and you can see and you can compare, so you know what the color of the soil is.
The top 3 teams advanced to the nationals, leading up to the international contest.
Last year, we were fortunate enough to the students such as this and Danielle to go to to win the national contest. So I coached the international team at the international contest, which was hosted in Hungary. None of the students that are actually here were on the international team. This was the top 4 places that were from 4 different universities to the international contest. But it was still a wonderful experience.
This year, Virginia Tech, UT Knoxville, and Tennessee Tech placed in the top 3 of the contest hosted by Murray State University.
I commend Dr. Ian Handiani, our soil professor, our students, our faculty, and our staff for helping come together to do this contest. And obviously we couldn't do it without the Natural Resource Conservation Service and Mr. Jerry McIntosh, Rudy Forsythe, and Steve Blanford had just devoted their whole month basically to getting set up for this contest.
So yeah, I guess there's no soil judging due to social distancing either. So it's not just basketball, football. Excuse me. So maybe we'll start a soil judging team here at Green River. Go Gators.
I'm down.
So classifying soils. That's what those students were doing. And you saw those sheets that they had, and they're basically going through all the different horizons and looking at the structure and the pore size and the amount of roots and everything to the nth degree in each of those different horizons, and taking notes on that. And then once you have those notes distilled, then you can go into the taxonomy book and start piecing out what type of soil it is, and that's how you win. And so basically, you know, a lot of these terms that we're using to describe soil are based on moisture regimes, which are, like I discussed yesterday, closely tied to climate, right? And the water cycle and climate, because they drive each other. Soil moisture, you know, is basically driven, is climate driven. And so, like we've talked about early on in the quarter, climate being one of the 5 soil forming factors is one of the most influential. And this is, you know, one of the reasons, or not only reasons, but this is kind of the reason why, you know, we're using terms like aquic to describe wet soils and high water tables, or udic, which means there's a humid climate, you know, and things like this. It's all very closely tied to climate. Ustic, semi-arid. A lot of these sound like, you know, foreign language. Xeric, now a lot of you may have heard xeric before. Mediterranean climate. Sometimes the climate here in Seattle or the Pacific Northwest is compared to a Mediterranean climate, which is similar in the summer, not so much in the winter, but we do have, you may find some soils here with some xeric properties to them in the Pacific Northwest. Aritic, you're not going to find that here unless you go to the east side, but you will find some aritic soils, few and far between, in Washington State. And so this nomenclature, like we were talking about, we've got the prefixes of udic, we've got then the suffixes of sol, like all the 12 orders are all Spotisols or Histosols. And so a suborder has 2 syllables, basically. The first syllable often describes the soil moisture regime and or other key identifier, and the second one is the formative element, the order to which it belongs. So udol, the example here is udol, ud for udic climate, and all for mollisol. So that's where you get an udol type soil. So this is a table with just kind of breaking down each of the soil orders, what the formative element is. So like that Ultisol that we just looked at, sol coming from the OO or the OLL from Mollisols. It's Latin derivative. So mollis means soft, and mollisols are those ones that are really great for growing crops because they have really, really super deep A horizon, and they are pretty well, you know, aerated and drained, and so just perfect for growing crops. Different soil moisture regimes. What? Already went over that. So that was a repeat. So official series descriptions now. The taxonomic class, so like we talked about yesterday, is very similar with the phylum and family and genus and species, like that. So you've got kind of color codes them here, which is kind of helpful. You got your family modifier, your subgroup, your great group, your suborder, and then your order, right? And your order is going to be one of those 12 soil orders. And just like we saw in that pyramid yesterday, you know, you get greater and greater number of species or things, soil types in those groups. the lower you go. And so we're going to look at two soils here, the Everett and the Alderwood, and these are series. They're soil series, which is what you're going to get out of a soil survey, basically. So when we look at the web soil survey here after the break, and look at the lab we're going to do with it, that's basically what we're looking at, is just the soil series. Now, they may go into some of this diagnostic stuff, but in some of the explanation of the series or the area, but a lot of this is basically found out by ground truthing. You really need to get in there, and because this is basically identifying your soil type with a finer grain tool, right? So that's very difficult to do with a soil survey. Like I said, a lot of the soil surveys are done with GIS and with LiDAR these days, and so you you can't get down to this this type of level of detail. So other things we look at, and so I think I also mentioned too, Alderwood, I believe, covers about 65% of the soils found west of the Cascades in Washington State. And then you've got the Everett, which is similar to the Alderwood, not quite as much. I think it might be 12% of the soils, but if you add both of those together, because they're very similar, you're getting like almost 70% of the soil is Everett and Alderwood. And so they're pretty well, the number one soil you're going to find when you're digging around. And like some of you may have seen on some of the YouTube videos, I've scraped a bunch of road cuts and I've dug a few soil pits out there this spring, and what I keep finding in most of the forested areas where I work is a meter to a meter and a half of gravelly, sandy, kind of loamy, glacially influenced soil with a lot of big round rocks in it, unconsolidated. And then 2 meters or so down, you find compact glacial till, which is like impenetrable to water. And so that's pretty much your Alderwood soil series there. And if we go out, if everything goes as planned and we go out on Wednesday, a week from today, then we will see some of this stuff in real life, and I'll get to explain it in real life, and it'll be cool. So when you're on the soil web survey and you dive into some of the soil series information, this is basically what you're going to see. This is also the type of information you'll see on your, there's an app called Soil Web that it's free on your phone. And I think they have both, Android and Apple for it. So you basically, it's an app that it'll tell you whatever type of soil series you're standing on wherever you are, as long as you have to have service, unfortunately. So is a little limiting, but these days, service is getting pretty far out there, so it can come in handy. And so this just breaks down what you're looking at, kind of what we did with our pits when we did it at our little lab, but just with a lot more detail again, because they're going at it, with a little bit fine-tooth comb. They've got the 7.5 YR 4.3, and that's the Munsell color chart information. It says their A horizon was 3 to 8 centimeters deep. The O horizon was 0 to 3 centimeters. And you got a BW, that's a weakly formed B horizon. You got your C1, your C2. So this is getting into your parent material down to 150 centimeters. And here's the Alderwood series. This is just the same thing going into each of these with a fine tooth comb. So you've got your major diagnostic horizons, and then you've got so you got A, O, right? Things like that. And then you've got your subordinate horizon or designations, excuse me. And so those are mostly found in the B horizons because, well, you can have a little bit in the O, OI, OE, and OA. That's where you get into, you don't really use those unless you're doing just like a histosol where it's 100% organic matter. And the IEA of those are different terms for the different types of organic matter, like I was saying, between distinguishable or recognizable, then less recognizable, and then not recognizable at all. But there's probably, out of all of them, there's more subordinate designations in the B horizons, like I was saying. So if you had a B horizon that had a lot of clay content in it, you would call it a BT with a little t. If you had one that had calcic, accumulation of calcium carbonates in it, then you would give it a subordinate of B with a little k. Then you've got cambic horizon or weakly developed horizon. There's quite a bit of weakly developed B horizons in our area around here because of glaciers and the amount of time that our soils have had to develop. So you see a lot of BWs out there. Then you get into some pans like the fragipan, like they were talking about in the video there for judging soils. BO is for oxic, so it's got highly weathered. If you got a really red redox layer, you might have a BO horizon, and so forth and so on. And then when you get into the spodec horizons, you get a BH or a BA or a BS. And those are the subsurface accumulation of iron, aluminum, and organic matter that's being leached through. So those will be underneath your E horizon. Okay, and so again, part of climate besides moisture is temperature, right? So temperature, moisture, things like that, climate, super important. That's where you start to get, when you take temperature and moisture, use those to really divide out the different types of soils that you'll find. So, of course, you've got cold starting over here on the left of this rainbow kind of chart here, and then going to the left, we go from cold to hot, from left to right. And so we've got gelic, cryic, frigid, and here those are in the Cascade Mountains there. Gelic are going to be more like Alaska and the poles. And then in the lowlands, you've got mesic and thermic, and then hyperthermic, which is super hot. And all those influence your soil types. So now looking at basically moisture regime here, going down, we've got wet going from the top, getting drier as you go down or decrease here. The wettest you have, it's called periodic where your precipitation exceeds the I don't know what ET stands for, but so you have precipitation in all months basically, so it's all um, throughout the season. So that's not really us here, right? Does that make sense? Because we like dry out typically in the summer, and so we would not be in this per UDIC. Like I said, we would be more in the xeric, where you have dry in all parts, um, greater than 45 consecutive days, but summer, um, it's dry basically. So it's like if you have more than 45 consecutive days when you don't have any precipitation at all, that's where you get into the xeric. And we've got UDIC, Ustic, and then below the driest at all of these would be the Aritic. So units
Which
that
is
we look, go ahead.
like Aritic is the east of the Cascades portion of the state would definitely be Aritic, right? It's not the xeric.
Some of it would be in the southeast, and some in the northeast too, I believe, in some higher desert areas like around Okanagan.
Right. Yeah, they get some. Okay.
So a unit for soil classification, basically the smallest three-dimensional unit that we come up with as a soil scientist is a pedon. Or a ped, which is basically your structure of your soil. And again, you really don't kind of get any much structure until you get into your B horizons and C horizons. And that's where you get into the subangular blocky, angular blocky structures, platy structures, prismatic structures like they were talking about finding there in Vertisols, and so forth. And so that's the basic unit that you use is basically, it's called a pedon. Polypedon is a group of closely associated pedons in the field, and a soil series then, like we were talking about, and what we kind of use more so than anything else in my field and in land management is we talk more in soil series than we do anything else. We don't really get into a lot of this, in judging it down to the nth degree. Knowing the soil series is enough to make most of the decisions that we're going to make, and have good information from that soil series without having to go into, I mean, it's really nice to know a lot of this terminology. That way, if you do have to go that deep into it, you can. But I don't use a lot of this terminology, in my daily, in my workday. So here's kind of an example, a visual of what a pedon looks like. It's this unit of soil here, basically. And then so this map, which is looking at the Malabar series, soil series. This map shows you all these different polygons on it here with numbers. And then it's got arrows pointing here, as if you can imagine in this area here, it's like a field. Excuse me. And it's going to all the number 27. So the way this soil map pops up, it pops up with numbers. It looks pretty much like a paint by number painting because it's got all these numbers on it and little polygons. But all these numbers stand for different soil series. And like I said, they use GIS and LiDAR and a little bit of ground truthing from the 70s when they did the first soil surveys. But now that they've gone and redone all the soil surveys, a lot of this information has changed because of the advent of LiDAR and better technology with GIS. And so you've got way finer detail these days too, of soil series, location and things like that as well. But this is just kind of basically showing you how they would, we'd come up with this information, or, soil scientists do come up with this information remotely on a computer, and then they go out in the field and would dig a hole and take the information of the hole to ground truth, basically, to make sure that everywhere it says this should be soil 27, it is actually the same soil. Now, you can't get out and, of course, ground truth everything. That's just not possible. So they come up with a system of how much of the area they need to ground truth, and it's based on weighted averages based on, the popularity of the soil series. And so, like I said, after the Dust Bowl happened, we needed to, basically have a language for soils. And so the USDA at the time, they started the NRCS, and just to specifically focus on soils. And they came up with these maps and the way to map soils. And they do a whole lot of outreach work and work with farmers, especially in the Midwest and Eastern Washington, Oregon, wherever there's a lot of agriculture. And they'll come in and do soil tests. They'll do like consulting, talk to you about farming, about land conversion, all kinds of different things. Super cool agency. And they created, not only did they create the old maps, but they've gone now and created an online version of it. And it's called the Web Soil Survey, which I'm going to show you. Because before, you'd have to go, look, find out your area, go find the certain map, find the certain polygon, then go to the soil survey book, look it up. And, it was, 6 or 7 steps there, where now it's just a couple clicks and boom, it's there, and you can export it, download it. You can create, your own, I don't want to say page necessarily, but, you can keep track of your files. And it's really cool system. Here is a more recent, in fact, this is Green River College here. This is on the lab. So yeah, and you want to stick around while I explain the lab today, because I'm going to go through it step by step and basically show you how to do it. And it's unfortunate not everybody made it to class today, because it's an important lab. But so this is all basically about the Web Soil Survey. Just goes into more detail here. It's not necessarily about the lab I have us doing, but it's got some good information in it. I'm going to skip over it because I'm going to show you everything on the Web Soil Survey. But this is interesting here, kind of like what I was talking about, how we can use topography and how we can use geomorphology, to kind of begin to identify where soils might show up, right? I mean, it's super closely related to plant associations as well. Once you get out there on the landscape and you start walking around in some of these types, if you walk from a drumlin, these are like drumlins basically here that are full of the alderwood series, that have cobbles in them, unconsolidated glacial material on the top meter or so, BW horizons. And then you go down into this valley bottom and you get the Buckley series. And it's called the Buckley series because it's got a lot of silt and especially glacial silt material. Because if you can imagine, Buckley was probably hit with a lahar or a mud flow, from Mount Rainier at some point in its history, at least once. And it's also got the Green River and, a lot of other really, really large river influences. So you're going to get those silts in there. So, it becomes an art form to be able to kind of walk into the woods there, look at the topography, look at the plant life, and then you can start to say, well, I bet you that soil, kind of starts to look like this. But if you do end up digging enough holes while observing all those things to actually try and figure out what is there, you can actually start to kind of grow this, slideshow, basically like a presentation of PowerPoint presentation of these different slides of, oh yeah, I see alder and I see salmonberry and the soils are kind of mushy, so on the top, I bet you these soils have some hydric properties to them. Sure enough, you dig within a foot or two, your hole's starting to fill up with water, and you've got kind of these wetland type soils. So let's see here. Why don't we take a break real quick? And I'll come back. Let's come back at 5 after 2. And I will go over the lab in detail, show you how to do it, and then set you loose on the lab to do yourself. Okay?
Cool. Yeah, the last slide before that was showing like 169 and Seattle was really cool.
Yeah.
Good visualization. I like that.
Yeah. How much time do you have, Peter?
I got another hour. So.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Yep. So I'll be right back, and don't go anywhere, and we'll do this lab.
Cool.
It'll be fun. Hey, it's you. So, got a lecture from 1. It's crazy. And then my phone is going on. Right. All right. Anybody seen any murder hornets recently?
No, thank God.
They sound pretty horrific, don't they?
Yeah.
So believe it or not, someone had made this sign to look like it was an official DNR sign and put it up on Tiger Mountain in a few different spots, warning people about murder hornets, but we haven't even seen them around Tiger Mountain. The only thing I've heard about them being is like up in the Skagit Valley kind of area up in the north. But for some reason, we have this like rogue person in our area that wants to warn people about murder hornets that don't exist, or I mean, they exist, but they haven't been seen. So that's kind of bizarre.
Let's hope they don't migrate down here.
Yeah. We have enough shit going on.
Exactly. Plus, it's supposed to be an extra hot summer this year, so that's always cool.
Yep. We're going to have probably a smoky fire season again.
Shit.
Sorry, allergy folks. So I've also and there may be some things changing again with this whole outdoor lab experience that we're gonna do, or field trip. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Paul.
Go ahead.
Brian's internet kind of like cut out. He was wondering if you can let him back into the class.
Got it. Thanks, man. Hey, Brian. Cool. So I updated some things on the syllabus where I spread out some of the due dates on some things to give you guys a little bit more time. And some of the, like I said, since we're gonna have a potential field trip actual day, and I know all of you can't make that, so I have to have an assignment for people that can't make that. I may just like turn the third video virtual field trip quiz into that makeup assignment, I guess, for the people that can't make the field trip. I'm still trying to figure stuff out like that. So I appreciate your patience and bearing with all the changes that I've made to the syllabus throughout the quarter. But it has been, you know, unforeseen circumstances that we've been going through here. So, but I appreciate everyone's flexibility, and I've been trying to get things up and a little bit more advanced, and I hope to have the next field trip quiz done today, so that'll be posted. And I posted the final reflection and the extra credit lab too. And if you have any questions about the extra credit lab, feel free to email me. This lab is required, the one that we're going to go through today, by everyone, because it's something that everyone can do. It does, however, have an extra credit component to it that you're more than welcome to do, but it's involving that app that I was talking about, and not everybody may not have the smartphone or access to download the app or whatnot, and so I couldn't really force everyone to do that if they don't have the opportunity. So If you go, let's see, let's go to the actual assignment.
Have you not posted this on Canvas yet?
I have. I posted it last night. It is Lab 2 Web Soil Survey. Bear with me.
Oh, I see it. Never mind.
Okay, here we go. Lab 2 Web Soil Survey. Well, you'll see, come on. There we go. At the very top, I have basically kind of the example of what the assignment should look like as far as data recording and things like that. So that's super helpful. You want to definitely look at that and try and follow that. And then here's the link to the web soil survey, which we'll look at here in a second together. And then I've basically got the 4 locations. One is an address in Issaquah. One is I give you section, township, and range. The other I give you just the name. So, you know, figure that one out. You might have to think a little bit, not too hard, because it's Green River campus. And then the last one is up to you. It's pick a favorite place. It doesn't have to be in the woods necessarily, but sometimes you'll find the web soil survey, especially like if you're going to use it in like downtown Seattle, it doesn't really work because those soils aren't really soil types anymore because they've been covered up by concrete and stuff like that. You will find some in residential areas though. So if you've got like a favorite, like Discovery Park, you know, and places like that show up. But just keep that in mind. And then I go through the steps, step by step here. So let me show you what that looks like. This is the Web Soil Science or Web Soil Survey homepage. So when you click on the link in the assignment there, it gives you this. And there's a huge green button here. Start WSS. There's like too many links on this homepage. It's one of the homepages type things that drives me crazy. SharePoint's the same way for both my organization at DNR and Green River College. It's just too many options. Anyhow, we get off my rant about homepages. Start web soil survey is what you want to do. It does kind of have a time limit on it, so that's something to note. Like, let's say if you're working on one of these locations and you go make a sandwich and then you get distracted and go walk the dog, and you know a couple hours later come back and it might have kicked you out. And I think it does that because of the amount of people using it and everything like that. So it has to keep a certain amount of its bandwidth open or whatever. And we're on the slow road here today with our internet in lovely Redmond, Washington. That's definitely one of the things that's come out of this whole Corona thing that's rather interesting and unfortunate, actually, is just the amount of different types of internet, and the quality of internet people have, and how that affects everyone's life now, because you need freaking internet to survive, basically. So it's going to give us, the whole U.S., which is great. Again, the U.S. Well, NRCS is a national federal agency, right? But they do each have their own kind of chapters and stuff, and so you can search on the Washington NRCS website. It'll have a separate website than this. But basically, I'll just kind of go over a little bit of the guts here of this website tool, GIS type tool that we're using here. It's very, very similar to GIS in a lot of its uses. So if you're familiar with GIS, it shouldn't be that difficult. It's a little bit dumbed down because, not every farmer or person, natural resource manager necessarily, or especially small landowners, like we come up against a lot of small woodlot owners and stuff like that at the DNR and stuff that are able to utilize this information because it's easy to access, easy to understand, easy to use. Okay, along the top here, so we've got these 5 major tabs. Your area of interest is the first tab, and that's probably the most important, except next to it is the soil map tab, which will be the second most important that we're going to be dealing with. I do welcome you to, play around with this tool as much as you want. It's got a lot of features that I'm not going to try and get everyone into because I don't know everyone's comfortability with working with some of these tools. And so we're going to keep it super simple, just a few clicks and a few different tweaks. But if you're one of those types of people that likes to figure some other things out, there are definitely other ways. For instance, of presenting the information, like I'm asking you basically to just kind of write information either on a piece of paper, or not paper, but on a Word document. I guess you could write it on a piece of paper and then send me a photo anyhow, but or camera scan me a PDF. So many different ways now, but I'm just looking for a text entry for this, or like I said, if you want to upload a Word document, that's fine as well. But within here, there are ways where you can export the data into like tables and spreadsheets and all kinds of stuff like that. But I don't want to get into that with this class right now. So we'll keep it simple. So again, these top tabs here along the top, you've got area of interest. That's pretty much going to be your polygon, your main area. You got your soil map, and that's going to show you the soil types once you've chosen your area of interest, right? The quick navigation on the left here is your friend for finding where you want to go, right? So for the first one, we've got an address for the location A. And so we can just go to address here, type in the address, hit view, and then it'll zoom you into that address. Now there's another one on here because I can't make it too simple, that I gave you section, township, and range for. And so for that one, you'd want to go down here. All these different ways that you can search for your area that you're looking for. And you can use latitude and longitude. You can, if you know the soil survey area, you can even look with like state and county. or section, township, and range. And that's the other one that we're going to use. So we're basically going to use address and or section, township, and range. And so for address, we'll type in 1801 10th Avenue, Northwest. Washington. Click view. And it may take a second because got ghetto internet. And there it is.
Dial-up speed.
Yeah. I'm not feeding the squirrels enough.
Yeah.
They're unhappy. So boom, here we are at our address, and it's still thinking, and it's still thinking. Come on. Okay, so that was basically step one. Type the address or the section, township, and then click view. Step two is to change the scale, basically. So what we have here, if in the lower left-hand corner of the map, we have a scale for this map here, and it's looking like about 1.25 inches is 1,000 feet for this map. Now, if we go up to the scale here at the top of the map, this scale down here, the 1,000 foot scale, isn't that important. I really want us to focus on changing the scale here. And in order to do that, you just click on scale, because I want us to look at this at inch to 20,000 scale. Yeah, I know. Oh, click on this up down arrow to the right of the scale button, and it'll give you different options here. And the two options we're going to use for this lab are inch to 20,000 and inch to 6,000. Those are the only two you need to use. So we're going to use inch to 20,000 first. So we click on that, and what that's going to do is zoom us out, right? Eventually. Man, it's nice out. But the cottonwoods are flying around. Have you seen the little cotton balls flying around? Yeah, a ton of cotton balls flying through the air right now.
Those are the worst.
Yeah, that's usually, for me, that's when my allergies really start to kick in, when the cottonwoods start dropping. Okay, so it's kind of rebooted my map here. And if you look now at this scale down in the left bottom here, it says 1 inch or so is about 3,000 feet. So you know that we've changed, almost 3 times greater. And then what we're going to do is we're going to choose our area of interest, right? Let's see what it says over here. Step 3, use the area of interest tool, right? So there are these icons up here on top of the map, and there are 2 area of interest tools. There's one that's rectangular, and then there's one that's more trapezoidal, where you can choose like a specific area if you wanted to like look at the area between these rivers or whatever, or this development over here. Then you could do some kind of oblong, angular deal. What we're going to use is just the rectangular one. So you click on that, And then, start in the upper left-hand corner, hold the left mouse button down and try and capture as much of the map area as you can at your inch to 20,000 foot scale. And this may take a little bit of time here, because what it's doing basically now is it's really focusing in on the data of that area. And so it's going to show us now a hatched work pattern. It when it loads here. Also, you'll notice too, don't freak out about this, but you'll notice it changed our scale to 1 inch to 24,000. However, I mean, it did that because it likes to have some kind of border around the AOI area of interest. But we're still just only gonna, all the information is just gonna be in this inch to 20,000 foot scale. So don't worry about changing the scale after you've done this. Because what you'll notice, what's gonna happen here is we're gonna now, this hatched area is our area of interest. If you look at kind of the area of interest properties now on the pull down menus on the left, the very top here, you'll see AOI properties, and you'll see, this is an important button to know, clear AOI. That's what you'll want to do in between, any of the different scales you're going to look at, and of course different areas that you're going to look at. And then an interesting number that you get is the amount of acres. So at inch to 20,000, if you fill the screen in with your rectangle, you end up consuming about 2,700 acres, almost 3,000 acres, basically, of area that we're going to be looking at the soil series of. And so that's pretty much the important data there, and this clear AOI is an important thing to know as well. But so now what we do, step 4, we click on the soil map tab. So we go back up to the top of the tool here, the web soil survey tool, and next to the area of interest tab is the soil map tab. And this is where the magic happens. Wait for it. Do you believe in magic? Oh boy.
Looks like you need to feed the answers again.
Oh yeah. It's thinking. It's a lot, You'll notice if your AOI is smaller, it takes less time. 3,000 acres is kind of large. It'll crash sometimes too if it's too large. But so what's popping up here now, on the left here, are all the different soil series that are found in those 2,000 or 2,700 acres that we just chose it to find, and it's alphabetical. It's got their unit symbol. So this unit symbol on the far left of the table here is the unit symbol that you'll find in what's going to look like, again, a paint by numbers kind of a deal here over Issaquah. Then it's got a link. See there it's popped up. Here's your little paint by numbers, but instead of having numbers like we did in the PowerPoint presentation, we have abbreviations. So AGC is your alderwood, and typically when you've got like another designation like C, that'll stand for maybe another series that's maybe present, because you'll get, it's just like anything, soils are pretty sloppy, and you might get 2 different series that migrate together in some way, and so you'll have an alderwood and an Everett, or an alderwood and a Buckley, and then you got to figure out which one's predominant, and whether or not they're, there's a clear distinguishing, feature, and on and on and on. But I think this is super cool, and this is a tool I use at work all the time. I'll when we're doing timber sale planning, before I go out on the ground, I'll create this map, and now I can it's geolocated too, and so I can put it in a Venza map, and I can go out there and find the soils and make sure that it's correct. Basically, that's kind of what I'm doing, ground truthing the information it's giving me. And since they just did these surveys recently, this information is pretty super up to date, which is nice. And it's interesting too, you can see even in this urban atmosphere here where we've got housing development here, you know, we've got Costco and, you know, the whole I-90 corridor here going through Issaquah. You know, this is like the Front Street exit over here. You guys kind of know where we're talking about, right? And then you've got W stands for water, by the way. This is Lake Sammamish, the north end of the lake. And so you can start to see the way these polygons too, like, see this is the South Fork of Issaquah Creek. No, north, excuse me. North Fork of Issaquah Creek here. And if you look at it, there's this whole soil series that follows the creek. And then when it busts off into this creek next to it, which doesn't have a name on it, so I don't know exactly what it is, sorry, that flanges out, even that soil polygon flanges out, you know, and then comes around here, and we're out of our area of interest now. There's a rock pit over here. It just says pits, which is kind of funny. But so that's not a soil series. Don't look up the pits series. That's like water. It's just letting you know that that's a gravel pit. But you do, you know, it's kind of interesting, even though, you know, like we've been talking about, yeah, once you cover the soil with concrete, it's no longer soil really. I mean, it's still soil because there's still a little bit of living, but you've actually, you know, you kind of just stop that soil processing in time. But we still have it mapped, you know, it's still mapped. And so that can be quite helpful, because there's a lot of area around this area in Issaquah where we've got, you know, the park. I think we've got some golf courses, you know, we've got Lake Sammamish Park up here, and then we've got some forest land over here in the southwest, you know, and things like that. And you can see, you know, just if you know the landscape, you can also use Google Earth along with this. I like to do that on the side too, because this doesn't give you a very good three-dimensional map like Google Earth can. And so if you don't know the area or having trouble figuring out kind of how elevation might change, then you can look at Google Earth and that'll help you as well. But yeah, so this is kind of, you know, the first part of the lab. You're going to want to look at just kind of like what I was. We've got a river here, we've got a lake here, we've got forest here, industry here, a rock pit, you know, and basically you want to kind of, you know, put your land manager hat on, and I've got a bunch of typos in there I got to fix. And just kind of take note of streams, lakes, and features like that might influence, you know, your management decisions on this landscape, because that's going to weave into a later question. I think also at this point we are going to record some data here. We're going to record how many different types. Don't name all the different types, just numbers of different types. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we almost have 20 different soil series in this 2,700 acre area. And so what it does too, so, looking at this table again on the left, it gives you the unit or the series, and you can click on it. And then, because we are going to do this in the next part of the lab, you don't have to do it on this one if you aren't interested. We'll be focusing more on, once we get to a smaller scale, just looking at these a bit more in depth, because we don't want to go and look at all 20 of these series. That would take a lot of time that we don't have. So this now gives you that soil series, the basically the breakdown, the information of that soil series. So it talks about what kind of settings you might find the soil in, the typical profile you might find, properties and qualities. So this is going to be properties and qualities, properties and qualities, properties and qualities. Is going to be a very, very, very important section for you to look at for later questions, okay? Because it talks about drainage class, capacity, limiting layers to transmit water, depth of water table, frequency of flooding, and things like that. So that's going to come in handy for some later analysis. Then the next box over it tells you how many acres that specific series has in your area of interest. And then next to that, it tells you what percentage that makes up. And so we're not recording all of that in this one. We're just, again, this is kind of, we want the total acreage on this, and then we want the soil series that has the most amount of land cover by acres and percent. They're going to be the same one. So we look, who's got the most? Sammamish silt loam has 20% of the 2,700 acres is this Sammamish silt loam. That's the winner. That's the winner. So you might want to click on that one. I didn't say to do that in the instructions, so you don't have to. But again, you're going to be using that information of you looking at the map and imagining what, how the river might react to a certain management decision or something like that, whether or not you might have frequent flooding in the area. And so here's your description of that soil, and then it says down here, it says hydric soil rating. Yes, so that's a hydric soil, so that means it's wet a lot of the time. So that's muy importante. And then that's pretty much it for this kind of first section of the lab. The next one we get more fine-tuned. So what we're going to do is you want to, and this is kind of important, but you want to clear, where to go? You want to clear your area of interest. So what you do is you go back to the area of interest tab at the top and click on that. And wait. And wait some more. And you'll notice here we still have our addresses in here. The map is loading. But up at the top here, underneath AOI properties, we have clear AOI. And so we're going to click on that. And hopefully I'm not going to like overburden it and it starts smoking out of the monitor here or something. I get a little impatient sometimes. I just start clicking all kinds of buttons and the computer hates me. Okay, so we no longer have our hatched area on our map. So after we clear the AOI, now we're going to go and change the scale. And what we're going to do is get into a closer, finer scale at 1 inch to 6,000 feet. And we're going to examine each of these soil series basically closer, is the idea. And so basically we're going to repeat the steps that we did for, for the inch to 20,000 scale, except we're going to go in and read each of the soil series and then write a little bit of a paragraph here, kind of, talking about basically, is this the best use for this land? Why or why not? And get you thinking about kind of, basically like, should we be farming here or should we have a Costco? And things like that. So you're going to choose the AOI tool again. And again, top left corner, make as much room or as much area as possible in your little map section. And also on this lab, don't get so hung up on right or wrong answers either necessarily. There's a lot of different answers to these questions. I don't want you to stress out too much about that. I'm not necessarily looking for something. If you think this is a good spot for a Costco and you can explain it with some of the information that you've been taught this quarter and some of the information that this awesome website's giving you, I'm all for that. I'm all for, you explaining your rationale, thinking critically, and using those kind of skills, observing, to prove your point or to make your point. So if you'll notice here now in the area of interest information section, we've now shrunk down to 243 acres. So rather than 2,700. So gone down a complete order of magnitude in acreage, which is a little bit more of a reasonable area to look at. Then we click on soil map. Is this pretty clear for everyone? Is everyone getting this? Or is this like completely over some people's heads here? It's hard for me to judge, sorry.
No, we're following. I got you.
Okay, good. Please let me know. Don't feel embarrassed or anything if you're having issues with it or, or not comfortable using this type of tool. Shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk to you on the phone if we need to help you understand how to use this tool. And again, you'll notice it changed the scale here. Don't worry too much about that. We're really just focused on our little blue rectangle here. And boom, we've gone down to 4 different soil series now that we just have to deal with. And then so you're going to want to go in and read each of these and record, you know, the same data as before with the inch to 20,000 foot. And again, I have this all explained in the example of the lab assignment here. You just follow that, hopefully just step by step. It is a little confusing. That's why I used Roman numerals in the example, because I was saying step 1, 2, 3 here. And then this one ended up using, you know, kind of an outline, and it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they weren't lining up, and it got confusing. So I figured I'd use Roman numerals. Hopefully that helps. But yeah, so basically the difference here is what we're adding on to, besides recording, you know, how many and which one's the most prevalent, and et cetera, is we're going to click on each of the different soil series and read about each series. And I would also suggest, and I might put this in here too, you might want to take some notes on the side, maybe a little bit too, especially if you have more than just 4 or 3 or 4. You know, if it's a hydric soil, you know, or what, and then that way you can talk about it in your paragraph, because basically the last step of this whole thing is to, you know, based on what you've learned in the soils course and read in the explanation of the soil series, is you write one paragraph on why or why not you think this land is being used to the best manner possible, and then also what land management issues or challenges one might face, you know, managing this land, either as it is now or if you changed it. You know, if you wanted to convert this back to agriculture, what issues would you face? Like, oh, we would have to rip up all the, you know, asphalt, and then we would have to add organic matter and wait 3 to 5 years in order to get these soils up to, you know, their original production, or something that is producing good crops. Or, you know, no, let's just build another Costco and let's put a high rise over here. And then, but oh no, what happens if Visquaw Creek floods? You know, and just think about things like that. And, you know, you can go as far as you want to go into the rabbit hole. I'm not looking for very deep rabbit holes here, but I want you to just kind of, you know, think of a little bit about, and, you know, and also use the soils information to prove your point, or not necessarily prove, but to make your point, you know, to make your case about, well, I think we should do this here. And, you know, in some of these areas, there's only 4 different areas. The one that's your favorite spot, you know, probably be pretty easy to do. You know, it's a camping ground or something somewhere, and you want it to stay the same way. And you can say that, that's fine, but, you know, try and throw a little bit of soils data in there to, you know, again, shed some light on why you think that, you know, this is, you know, I'm just trying to teach you how to build proof, you know, to make a case, and to research, to find information, to then, you know, make a decision, you know, basically on something. And again, there's no right or wrong decision. I'm not grading you on, you know, I hate Costco and I think this should become a farming area again. What I'm looking for is how you're using the information and how you're making a case. And then that's pretty much it. So you repeat those steps for the other 3 locations. Like I said, one's a section, township, and range. So you'd use the section, township, and range piece in the search area. Just make sure you're basically clearing your area of interest between changing scales. Otherwise, it gets really messy. And you're using the proper scales. And that's kind of why I threw in there, you know, I want to know the amount of acres you have, because if you're inch to 6,000, or you think you are, but you're not, and you're showing like 2,000 acres instead of 200 acres, I'm going to know that you're not actually at inch to 6,000, and that you made a mistake. And again, I'm not going to necessarily take off. I'm not going to take off points for that. I did rate this on a point system. This is worth 30 points, and it's not really dispersed in any manner at all. That's just I've got 30 points to work with the information and answers you give me. Now, quickly here, because I'm kind of running out of time, there is an extra credit component to this that can go to your final grade, not just this assignment. But if you want to, you can download on your smartphone this Soil Web app, and it's basically it's kind of a similar idea to the soil survey, but it's on your phone. And basically what it does is you go outside and you, as long as you have service, you just click the button on it and it'll pop up basically the information like as if you're looking at one of these series, and it'll give you kind of the A horizon depth and B horizons and all that stuff, and then explain each of the horizons, and then go into the land use, you know, issues and things like that. Basically, give you everything that in the report for the soil series. So it'll tell you what soil series you were standing on at that point. And for this part of or for this extra credit piece here, I just basically want you to get the app and then try it at home and see if it works at home, because it might not. That's fine if it doesn't. But then go for a walk and use it at least 2 more times, or as many as you'd like, but at least twice more. You know, and at home too, if it doesn't work, maybe trying to, you know, explain why it didn't. But you can, to turn in product for this lab, you can just turn in screenshots if you'd like of the soil series, that information that you get. And so then I was also thinking, if you wanted to get really super creative, you could, since we're going to be looking at Green River College on the soil web survey, you could take a trip to campus, and then try your app at campus and see if any of the information overlaps, or if it's doesn't coincide, or, you know, and compare and contrast it like that. But again, this part is just extra credit. It's not required for the 30 points of the lab that's above here, which is basically looking at these 4 different locations and going through these steps using the web soil survey. I wish it was an outside exercise since the weather is turning so nice now, but I'm sorry. So maybe wait for a crappy day. This is also, when did I say this is due? I think I give you some extra time on this because I wouldn't wait till the last minute to do this lab. I mean, you might even want to break it off into do like 2 in one setting and then 2 in another, because it's a little bit of work. But so yeah, this is not due until well, midnight on the 3rd, so the 4th of June at double lot. So you've got more than a week to work on it. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Well, that's all I have for today. I appreciate you tuning in. And I'm available by email if you do have any questions, comments, or concerns. Or if you find something seriously wrong with my instructions in this lab especially, please email me as soon as possible so I can get in there and fix it, since there were probably about 10 students that didn't show up today that are going to be flying a little bit blind and not having the same opportunity to see how to do the lab. With that, I hope you
Paul,
enjoy. Yes, go ahead.
You're gonna post your recording from today, right? Because I mean, that was a lot to go over for that lab, and I'm just worried I'll forget some things while I'm doing it. So I'd like to be able to grab this later so I can rewatch it.
Yeah. Yeah, I will post. I guess I could post this one separately. I'm still, all the lectures are posted on my OneDrive, but apparently not everybody has access to it. So I will post this one on Canvas. Hopefully there's enough room so that you can rewatch it.
Yeah, because I think with OneDrive, you have to like add us each individually. At least I know whenever I share stuff with my OneDrive, that's what I have to do. And last time I tried to access your OneDrive, it said you needed to authorize it.
Yeah, and I've tried to add a couple of students now that have been trying to get in there, and they won't even let me authorize them. So I'm, and yeah, I've been talking with IT, and they were talking about Panopto and using that, but so maybe I'll try that with this as well, with or with Canvas. But I'll let you know when I get this up.
Are you able to upload it to your YouTube channel?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, Mike could try that. That might work too. Sure. Good idea.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Alyssa. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
All right. Have a good one, Paul. Enjoy that sunshine.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Take care.
Bye, Paul.
Bye.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.